My name is Eleanor Skelton. I grew up here in Southeast Texas. I was raised in Mid-County, and my parents always went to church in Beaumont when I was a kid. So I was raised down here. When I was 10 years old, we moved to Western Colorado when my dad retired, and then we joined a little mountain church. So it's a different culture, but still just pretty much just like a normal and non-denominational church. A little different because we grew up Baptist. Then we went to this one church in Dallas. We moved to Dallas when I was 13, and it was called an IFCA church. It was a lot more fundamentalist, a lot more rule-based, and there was rules about like don't listen to certain types of music, and the pastor really felt like that was part of spiritual warfare and that he needed to guide us in that way. So we got really used to being in that. I was homeschooled all the way through, and so when we found a church with a lot of other homeschool kids, that felt like home. That initially felt really friendly, but then like most of the reason that people did homeschool was because they felt like public schools were evil in some way, or that they needed to control that. So when I was 16, we moved to Colorado Springs. We joined a very similar church that was very bent that kind of way. They would preach about how like all the other churches in Colorado Springs are not following the right way, or basically that we're right and everybody else is wrong. And the pastor would even say that sometimes, not usually from the pulpit naming other churches, but he would actually talk about other churches and be like, we're not like some of the other churches in our area. Maybe he wouldn't actually name names, but you knew what he was implying. And then sometimes he would, when you'd be talking to him in person, he'd be like, yeah, we don't do things like, a large megachurch in town, and he would actually name them. We do worship differently, we're more conservative, and we feel like that's better. It wasn't just like saying, we prefer to do things this way. It was, we do things this way and we are better or more spiritual because of that. And the church got more and more bent that way from the time I was 16, finishing up high school, and going into college when I was 19. And then it hit a point 3 years into college. I was a senior, I was doing a double major, doing really well in college, and my parents were concerned because I had friends who weren't Christians. They were worried that I was being influenced by them. And I felt like I was just getting to know other people and getting to learn how to do life with people, since I'd been homeschooled and didn't have many friends for a long time. And so they ended up taking me to the pastor. They felt like I should transfer to this really conservative Bible college, and I didn't really agree, and I didn't feel like that was God's will for me. So my parents and I met with the pastor, and he said that as an unmarried young woman, I needed to obey my parents and transfer to the school, even though it was not accredited, and I wouldn't be able to go to graduate school or do other things past that point, really, or it would at least be much harder. And the pastor said that if I didn't go, I was being deceived by Satan for not wanting to, and that basically really strongly implied that I wouldn't be welcome at the church, and they would be considering me to be living in sin. And so I remember sitting in the chapel and crying, and I told my mom, you realize I probably can't come back here. And my parents were kind of confused. They thought that bringing me to the pastor would help fix this problem or whatever, help get me back on the right track. And I felt really alone, and I felt like everyone was rejecting me and nobody would listen to me and how I felt and what I thought God wanted for my life. So I moved out on my own because that was the choice, either go to this really conservative school or move out and keep going to the college that you're going to. And so that was what I chose to do. I chose to move out. I wasn't able to talk to my brother and sister for the next 2 years really much at all, because the pastor told them that I was a bad influence and not to talk to me. And it was really, really difficult. My parents would come by and try to get me to come back to the church, or try to get me to change my mind, basically. And I kept telling them, no, this is the decision I made. I'm still really sure that this is the right decision. And it was really painful. And then I started making some trips back here because I was trying to sort out what is my faith and what is my parents' faith, but what do I believe?
And I tried to visit a few churches in Colorado Springs, but I didn't really find anywhere that I fit. There were a couple places I liked going occasionally on Sundays. I went through a period where I would feel really obligated to do certain things that seemed churchy. And I wake up on a Sunday morning and think, do I want to go to church or not? And if I wanted to, if I felt like that was something good and that was where I could find God, then I did. But if I woke up and felt really anxious or really like scared, I didn't go, because I thought that's not really healthy. That's not really, I think, what God has for me in terms of faith. So then I started making some trips back here to try to kind of reconnect with, I felt, with my roots after moving around so much. And then I came back to Beaumont's First Baptist Church where I grew up, and it was the same but also different. And they'd started doing a lot more community groups and discipleship groups. And I really loved that model of like church really based on community, because it seemed a lot more like what I read about the early church versus what I'd seen, you know, when I was in high school and college. Of church. And when I came back here and I reconnected, I started, after I'd been back here about a year, I started meeting with my pastor, and he said, you know, I know you really love Jesus, but do you really know Jesus? And it was the first time somebody asked me that in a way that didn't sound like they were implying that I wasn't really a Christian or that I was bad in some way. And so I really listened to that. I started asking myself, how much do I really know of Jesus, and how much is more like me being a fan of Jesus but being afraid to really trust him because of some of the pain in my past and the pain I've had from other people. And so then I ended up getting rebaptized last summer, and it's been really, really healing for me to be in groups with community where we all share a meal together and we all talk about life. Even though I was hurt by a church, another church was able to come around me and be a real family to me. I'm so thankful for Beaumont's First Baptist Church and helping me grow in a real relationship with Christ.
All right. Great. Awesome.